Hi, students. Beginning this week, week two, I will be looking for some primary source analysis every week. I'll be giving you the primary source and I'll be giving you some questions to help guide you through the process. So I call this the guided analysis. So I want to just introduce primary source analysis to you and tell you what I'll be looking for now that we're in week two. So the first question is, what is a primary source? We've covered that in week one. So if you don't know, please go back to the week one work and send me an email. I'd be happy to talk with you about it and explain more about it. So what am I looking for in your guided analysis? I'm looking for good solid paragraphs of about 3 to 5 sentences for each question. I'm looking for you to go to your primary source that I've given you to answer those questions. So if I was to say, ask what were some of the causes of the Revolutionary War, I'm not looking for you to list every cause of the Revolutionary War that's in your textbook. I'm looking for you to look at the source that I've given you and take a really tight look at that and say, okay, what is the source telling us about the causes of the Revolutionary War? So we want to stay tight to the source, understanding that every source has its context from a historic period. And then I want some specific details from the source. So if it's an image, tell me some of the specifics about what you see that lead you to the answers that you gave. If it's a written document, you can just tell me some of the details, but also quotes would be really appropriate, just some little short quotes. These are short answers, so not multiple sentences, but some good short quotes. Each week, the first question will always be, what are the ABCs? So this is a shorthand that I've created to jumpstart primary source analysis, but I think it's a good place to start. ABCs stand for audience, bias, and cause. Audience, who is the original intended audience? Bias, what is the creator's bias or point of view based on life circumstances? And cause, why did they create the source in the time period that they did? The first one is audience. For that one, I'm looking for the original intended audience. Very occasionally, someone has written something that they hope will be read by students in the future. That happens, but it's very rare. So your audience shouldn't be students in a classroom today. That's not why this person created this. When you write an email or a blog post or an essay for school, you're not writing it because you hope people in the future will read it someday, usually. And neither were people in the past. They weren't writing for us students today, they were writing for people in their own time. So, for example, I'm going to use Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech throughout. His audience, although we read it today and we read it in classrooms and it's still useful, his audience wasn't us in the future. His audience was right in front of him, the people attending the civil rights rallies and specifically the March on Washington, although he gave the speech more than once. So he also, though, knew that it was going to be televised. So his audience are people who might see it on TV in his time in 1963, in addition to the people in the crowd directly in front of him. So he had to take both of those into account when creating the speech. The next one is bias. So a lot of times I have students who get very nervous about bias. They don't want to say anything negative, especially if they agree with somebody, if somebody was an abolitionist or a civil rights leader, for example. But everybody has a bias because everybody's swayed by their own point of view and the things that happen to them around them. So, for example, with the Martin Luther King Jr. speech, I sometimes will have students say things like, well, Martin Luther King Jr. believed in equality, so he wasn't biased. He wasn't prejudiced, like in a negative way, but he was biased toward equality. He believed in equality and he believed in integration. And both of those things are part of his bias. He believed in the American dream. And he believed that the legal system and the legislature of our country could do a lot toward opening up that dream to Black Americans. So, right now, in our civil rights moments today, we see more distrust of government, more distrust of the legal system. And that's different. Martin Luther King Jr.'s bias was in favor, in fact, of the legal system and the government. So, that's just an example. The last one is cause. What caused this to be created? Why did the creator make it? For the speech that we're using as an example, it was written to sway public opinion, to get his base excited, to promote racial equality, and specifically to agitate for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's why he wrote it. It may be poetic, it may be a wonderful thing that we study today, but that's not why he wrote it. So those are the ABCs, and those are the things I'll be looking for when you start your guided analysis work this week. Please let me know if you have any questions.